If those who wish to listen to this presentation, if you can start making your way forward. Thank you. Thanks, David. No, probably not. Oh. Right. I last did this presentation with David on the 6th of August. It's the same presentation, so if you've heard it, you might hear different questions perhaps, but essentials had not changed. It took 37 minutes, 29.4 seconds for me to complete it, just to give you a feel for how long we're going to take, but it will deal with quite a lot of information. The slides, as I've said, via email, were available and are available on the parish website. If you go to the homepage, top right, you'll see a notice there. So particularly with regard to the diagrams that you can see here, you can see those therefore in much more detail. Second one, this is being streamed. As was the last presentation, there are two microphones, one on either side. Elizabeth has one, Elizabeth Atkinson, and Philip Arkle has the other. So if you do have a question, please just wait, stick your hand up, the microphone will come to you so that those externally can hear, those who are watching online can hear as well. And finally, sort of mentioned already, and you probably have seen around, the three table points, one here, one at the very back, and one to the left of the Victory over Japan display on the tables. There are the drawings there as well for you to have a look at in more detail. If you need to come forward, that's a good slide to look at in terms of its size, but writing will get smaller. So if you do not be embarrassed about coming forward to come and have a look at it, I'm not going to pause while you shuffle forward later on, otherwise my 37 minutes, 29.4 seconds will be increased. Yes. Excellent. Any better? Thank you. That's good, Sue. Thank you. Okay, and slide, and I stand back.
Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you very much for taking time out today to come and listen to this presentation. One of the wonderful things about churches is that they are never static. They're not museums. They are living, breathing places where the mission and ministry of God happen. And it is our task at the moment to think about how that can happen in a way which is right for this day and generation. Of course, there are one or two things which are quite necessary to do as we try and hit that target of being carbon neutral. And part of this process was started because of thinking about the heating in this building. We know how perishingly cold it can get in winter. And that's sort of livable with, in a sense, on a Sunday, but it does rather limit what we can do in the autumn and winter and early spring in terms of mission and ministry. One of the things I first thought about was how we could have an enclosed space in this building so that we could do things like courses, meetings. At the moment, I'm not complaining about this, so don't get me wrong, but at the moment we're having to meet in the workies for our PCC meetings, which is great in some senses, but it highlights the fact we've got this wonderful building which isn't always able to meet our needs. So the whole process of this is about what can we do within this building to help us meet the mission and ministry needs of this parish today and in the years to come. I'm quite heartened actually today because as one of our young people left today, it was Grace, such a positive person. She was going for the big plan. She said, it sounds like a really good idea to have 2 levels and offices upstairs. So, out of the mouths of babes? I don't know. Whatever we decide to do, there are going to be challenges. Whatever we decide to do, we are going to need to continue to pray about it and see how God can equip us to do the things that He wants us to do. I'll underline that because it's not about what we want. It's trying to listen to God and to see what he wants us to do today in ministry.
Thank you, David. My last slug. And your 37 minutes, 29.4 seconds start now. Slide, please. So, the bottom line up front is to the options we're talking about. We are talking, we refer to them as a vision and the pragmatic versions. The vision revolves around the west end of the church behind you. It is talking about a 2-floor independent enclosed space with meeting spaces, catering facilities, two loos, and a mezzanine space as the first floor, but with a wider building effort in terms of heating, lighting, seating, and audio-visual, which will coordinate with what is taking place in that enclosed space. The second is a more pragmatic version, and the two really are driven by the availability of funds, but the pragmatic version looks towards the Lady Chapel being the independent space as a cheaper, not cheap, a cheaper version. Really will include then the wider building in pieces in terms of heating, lighting, seating, and audiovisual as part of that. And it could be that we do parts of the Lady Chapel and parts of the wider project as funds come available as well. Slide, please. So, some of the background. We know we are the largest building in this town, but it's got significant historic features within it, which we've got to be pertinent and aware of. Its primary role is one of ministry, but it is not its sole role. It is a community facility, but it is really not fit for use in the 21st century. It is cold, as David has alluded to and stated, in fact, from spring and from late autumn into spring. So it limits, therefore, not only our use, but also the community's potential uses to those warmer times of year. The Victorian pews themselves, they limit the potential for any creative worship and further use. The lighting is inflexible, and a number of people, find it not bright enough. The audiovisual system does not, as you're looking at the moment, does not allow for fine-tuning during services or supporting wider events that are taking place in here. There are no effective meeting places. Again, as David has said, there is nowhere for young people during services. There is nowhere for community groups, perhaps, who wish to be involved or engaged outside of the service schedules to come and use facilities within here. Slide, please. So, turning to some of the principles that we've looked at, and I include 3 here, based on heritage, the environment, and inclusion and participation. So, we wish to better present this building in a heritage perspective, and I will come back to this heritage emphasis later on. But it is a building which has had things happen to it in the past, so heritage should not be a bar, or concerns about conserving as we are should not be a bar to further development. We will retain the building's heritage, but there has been evolution, not necessarily revolution, over the centuries, so do not be frightened of change. From the environment protection, from the environment perspective, we need to move away potentially from a gas-fired heater. The building's main source of heat has come from that for at least and more than 20 years. But the gas boiler itself is old, may fail. I'm not saying it is going to straight away, but we need to account for the fact that it will eventually pass its mortal coil on elsewhere. And we need to heat people rather than the building. And that is another important aspect to bear in mind. Heating the people, not the building. The lighting here is high, difficult to get at in terms of changing bulbs. The bulbs themselves are, whilst they are more modern than the old the filament types, they are nevertheless, they do need changing, and it's a bit of a pain actually getting up a ladder, and I get continually told off for going up on my lonesome to go and do so and toppling over and breaking things, including myself. So we do need to deal with that. Energy, light, and energy supply. We have our solar panels. It may be that we can increase the number of solar panels that we have available to us, but we can also internally generate and save that power which is generated by our solar panels through the use of battery technology, for example. And therefore use that energy, particularly during the winter months, the higher energy periods, toddlers' time, services clearly, Holy Communion during the week. When those times we can turn to the batteries to power lighting and heating and not have drawing from main sources. In terms of the inclusion, we want to welcome the wider community in here. There are aspirations to do much more in developing plays, concerts, use by the community of our facility. To some, they don't find the church that approachable. This may contribute to mitigating that and encouraging more to come and use the building. It may simplify, or it aims to also simplify the use of space and its effective use. So, for example, the Easter experience, the Christmas tree festival, how we can adapt and use that as a different space if we have got greater flexibility in using the space that we have at the moment, for example, moving around with the pews. We have wider users at the moment, the Children's Society. We've had Wintercombe players in here. We have had some clubs and societies. They have drifted away because in the main they can't do the winter regime inside here. We want to encourage them back. We want to continue to encourage the some 9,000 visitors that come annually. That was last year's figure, approximate figure. We want to continue to invite them to come back. We want to encourage them as well to be involved and enjoy the heritage of this building. We have done an initial crude questionnaire about a year and a half ago to some 80-odd societies and clubs within the town and within the area of the town. Some 30 replied. Currently, they're saying, no, we're not interested. You cannot guarantee us the year-round facility that we need and want to actually exercise their own activities. So we are creating a barrier by not having that facility available to them. Slide, please. And as I say, it's not stood still. It has developed. So it should not be what we're proposing, the ideas being proposed should not be a bar to future development. Slide, please. So, the PCC has approved the end state, and I'll leave you just to read through there. The main points are in bold. To approve the following end state that we wish to get to. My lips have stopped moving. All happy? Slide, please. So that's where we want to get to, but we recognise it ain't all going to happen all at once. And there is a possible plan about the phasing of activity to get this done. It could be that we start with the multifunctional independent space, with heating as a priority within the wider church as well. And then as funds develop or become available, then building up on to look at seating, audio-visual and lighting as part of these. So it's not a done and dusted, we understand how we're going to do this. It is dependent very much on the funding available. Slide, please. So some of the factors, therefore, that we've considered so far. The development funds. Now, that says 50k plus to develop this project to the extent that we can get it to the diocesan advisory committee. That is the diocese planning authority who says whether we can go ahead or not, the DAC. And I may refer to that again, the DAC, once more in future. That says 50k plus. That is a developing cost. At the moment, it's nearer actually the 100k that we need to find to develop this plan even before we can present it to the DAC. That is the need to find surveyors, archaeologist advice, designs advice, quantity surveyor advice, building historians advice, the list goes on. It is an expensive business to do. We've got to find these funds. The second one, we talk about the sources, the third one there, in talking about the National Lottery. I will mention this again, but the business about where we find these funds, there are very few organisations which will provide grant funding at the development stage. Not the execution. There are plenty we can go to go and find those sort of type things. Whether they'll give all the money is another question. But to develop this project to the stage of finding and getting the planning permission, there are very few people who do that. One of those, however, is the National Lottery heritage fund, and hence why, therefore, I'm emphasising in so much of what I'm talking about at the moment as heritage. As far as the independent space goes, we want to develop it for a younger, family-orientated environment. It's not just during services, but also as a community space itself. And it was possibly seen as a quick win, that's something we could put in place quite quickly. That may be optimistic, given some of now the figures we received for the works, even for the Lady Chapel as the lesser type job. I've mentioned the contingency against boiler failure. We need to get on with looking at how we provide effective heating. And I've mentioned as well, again, the business about phasing of funding and works dependent upon the availability of funding. So, the choices. As I've mentioned in the bottom line up front, or first or second slide, we have the West End option, we have an option up here. I'm going to turn firstly to the Lady Chapel, please. So, the Lady Chapel, the enclosed option here, the initial brief to the architect, our architect, was to provide an enclosed independent space in the existing Lady Chapel, a place for private prayer meetings, small services and events that can be lit and heated independently of the main church. So that's what he was asked to go away and look at. Now, he came back with a couple of proposals, which your little group of busy people, we not had that slide, busy people slide? Okay, right, sorry, I think I must have been missing something. Our group of 10 have been looking at, and they've come back with an architect's idea about saying, well, you can have a pod inside, you can do this. This is what we turned up with as the option. The arches in the chancel area to the end of the south aisle are fully glazed. So you find it fully glazed all the way around. So therefore making it independent for heat, for noise, and for sound as well. Glazed to the full height of the timber frame surround, and then sitting on the existing timber frame, a new framework would be placed of a similar sort of type on top of there to therefore completely take it over. The glazing therefore allows natural light to come in from the south aisle from the south aisle into still the nave area and the chancel, and the glazing is potentially independent and reversible. The existing timber screens at ground level here are retained, and the glazing is then inserted within or behind it. So what you'll therefore have is a Lady Chapel with a usable area which remains similar to the existing space, but with more cupboard space, storage space included within it, mainly intended probably along the west wall, this nearest wall side here. There's likely to be a new floor, take the carpet up, see what's underneath the timber floor, and potentially replace that floor. But the space would then be lit with high-level spots of an LED type, angled, placed discreetly, therefore, within there, and the AV to support within there as well. The existing windows, external windows, the glazed windows, we are thinking about bespoke secondary glazing. I'm talking secondary glazing, not double glazing. And again, I will come back to that point later on. In terms of heat retention. What we're not able to do particularly cleverly at the moment is provide insulation from above, because the space between that wooden ceiling and the roof work above it is insufficient to be able to do so. So it is a problem area that we would have to resolve. Now, many of those points that I've just mentioned actually are applicable still to option 2, the West End option. And as you can see here, and again, I'm going to leave you time just to have a look through those. Some of the points that the BCC decided were their essential, desirable, or nice to have elements within the project. Slide, please. So, the key points that come out from the West End option. It is an extensive scheme encompassing the entire West End, not just what you see behind the ex-chancel screen down there. The independent space, which is effectively the area of the current choir vestry, will become a space with the servery kitchen plus cupboards. The choir vestry would move from its current location up into the northwest corner up there, with a new ceiling over it to provide an enclosed, potential closed meeting room. The existing rood screen comes forward 1 pillar's distance, so some, whatever that, 20 feet or so, comes forward 20 feet. So that and the choir vestry area are brought forward, so they are considerable spaces in their own right. The existing rood screen is retained, however, as part of that, with glazing as part of it to therefore make it sound, heat, etc. proof. The base of the tower, currently where the kitchen and the loo is, that is refitted to house 2 toilets, storage and utility space within there, remembering that a servery kitchen is now part of the old choir vestry space as we see at the moment. Now the space above those ground floor facilities, above the old choir vestry, becomes a mezzanine area. We've lost much of the space that the red chairs would have occupied, and so the mezzanine space above it compensates for that, if necessary, for additional space for people to use. And above the choir vestry, the new choir vestry in the northwest corner, there is a potential second office space available now above there. The new door would be placed in between what is the new mezzanine, first floor, into the bell ringing chamber. That therefore provides, one, a second alternative escape place for those who are on the mezzanine, should there be a fire, but it also happily provides an alternative access point for those with more limited abilities to get up the current stone staircase from ground floor into the bell chamber. On the left-hand or south side of the mezzanine, that is where an access point for staircase would take you up to the mezzanine point, and within that incorporated something probably like a stair lift to allow, therefore, those with more challenging mobility to be able to get access onto that first floor space. What has yet to be resolved, amongst many other things, is what we're doing with the welcoming area, the entrance area in the southwest space. There is a danger it could become a bit of a dead zone as this area, the rood screen, comes forward, and we need to work out still how best that welcoming area, the porch area, is reconfigured to reflect these changes that are taking place. However, the font will be relocated at a location to be confirmed, but will come out of that particular area in the southwest. An AV desk, which you will see on the plans, is talking about it being a mobile, will find a home, a fixed home for it to go into. And as I mentioned, for the Lady Chapel, secondary glazing placed on the windows, which would be office, which would be coterminous with the office spaces. So if there's no requirement to put secondary glazing in because it's part of the church, then we won't be doing so. But if it's a potential office space, then we'll be looking at secondary glazing in there. So that's the essential of the bigger plan, and indeed our proposed, our ideal one. So the project elements themselves. Now I'm going to talk about these in a little bit more detail, but just remember that whatever we do decide to go for in the end, either that or that option, what we're doing with heating, lighting, seating, etc. in those has got to complement and not be at loggerheads with what we're proposing for the rest of the church. So they are complementary activities that are taking place, but they may take place at different times in being put in place. So, first of all, then, slide please, the heating and solar panels and power issue. From an environmental perspective, we should be moving away from gas, and that is what the diocese, and indeed common sense, perhaps, is telling us we need to move away from, to a potentially more efficient electric system or a more efficient system of some sort. We've got a large solar panel array already on the South Aisle roof, and we need to take better advantage of it. We generate income from it, but we don't use the power from it. And therefore, the idea of batteries to use that power, to take that power, store that power, and use it during the quieter or colder periods when we don't need to draw from mains electricity, particularly at more expensive times. It therefore keeps the business of running costs lower. And there are some relative energy costs that we need to work through in terms of air pumps versus gas versus electricity, which we still need to work through. Slide, please. So the heating proposals. I will talk a little bit more about some than others. A gas boiler is not necessarily a complete out. It may not be natural gas, it may be another source, but it is still a potential source of heat. The radiant chandeliers that you can see actually there, what we're talking about, they are remember old electric bar heaters which emitted that orange glow that came out of it? That's not an infrared chandelier which I'm talking about at the moment. These radiant chandeliers have an infrared emission of heat rather than heating up a coil which you might find in an electric heater. They are potentially problematic in terms of many people don't like the orange glow that come out of them. That can be resolved in a number of different ways in terms of covers and bits and pieces. There are issues with regard to their height in terms of, are they going to burn somebody who is more follically challenged than somebody else? Or indeed the distance from the focal point, how far out can you go? And typically something perhaps of that sort of type size, our current chandelier size, might have a radius of some sort of 5 meters, 4 to 5 meters or so. So it could potentially work in giving some coverage. So there's an option there. The radiant panels are a similar sort of type issue, infrared, but they're like radiators, if you like. The bigger you have them, the more the distance from them will heat. But the rub is, with the infrared type activity, it is a direct line of sight between the heating point and the person being heated. Thus, if you're sitting behind a column and the radiant panel is pushing power that way, you may well be in a dead zone to it. So it has issues itself. The individual seat heating. Now, we've been, via Tim Hall, who brought them back, have been experimenting both in the pews and in the choir stalls, some seat heating options. I appreciate people have said, aesthetically not very good, and I'm not really getting very much heat from feeling out of this, whatever, which we absolutely understand, and that is what this experiment was about. It's only an experiment. Just to perhaps allay some of those fears, with regard to the aesthetic of it, that was just something he got from off the shelf in Hong Kong and brought back to experiment with. What we are talking about is a bespoke, whatever it's going to be, heated seat, cushion, buffer, whatever, that is provided for this church, not something that's just bought off the shelf necessarily like that. So the aesthetic can be dealt with. With regard to the heat, if you've not sat on the brown type, they're no longer here, they're packed away for the summer. If you've not sat on the brown type, they have a greater heat emission than those ones which were back and bottom. And simply the power therefore was all going to the bottom, not being split between back and bottom. So there are issues which the experiment has brought up to us and go, we need to account with that. But it is an option. But it does also depend upon the type of seating that you are going to put in place as to how practical that is. There is underfloor heating, very expensive, very disruptive, but is a possible one for us to go for. There is under-pew fan heaters or electric heaters, the sort of type things you'll find in many different churches. But again, they are dependent on what sort of type seating you are going to go for. And the last one I mentioned on there, heat pumps. Heat pumps are great. They may not be appropriate to this building, but the more problematic one is where actually the heat pump is going to go out in the churchyard. Our initial feeling is from the DAC is they're not terribly happy about that idea, but it is something that we are still looking at. So, turning to power. I've mentioned we want to do some work with this. We are currently doing some work which may provide batteries in there by this winter as a separate but synchronized piece of work with regard to this wider project. Now, they do cost a lot to put in, but the feeling is probably within about 8 to 10 years they will have paid back any costs that you actually have required to pay for to put them in. If we do go for a heat pump solution, then it could be that we have additional batteries which store that sort of energy as coming as well. We can also consider solar panels sensibly on the south side of the nave roof, which is still available to us. And again, the complementary batteries that perhaps which would go with those, or potentially be able to go with those as well. Slide, please. Turning to seating, you'll see, and there are all sorts of options you can have. You can keep what you have, but these are pretty unwieldy and constrain us in how we use this space. And David and I's back will verify to the fact that moving that front pew now to its new position up there was a pretty painful exercise, and not one to be repeated very often. So there are options around. You can have seating, but the problem with seating is somebody's got to go and stack the wretched things one at a time, this sort of type thing. They will lock together and therefore stay in straight lines. That's particularly fine. But we're probably looking more at towards a sort of bench type thing. Lady Chapel, potentially unchanged, possibly more in the nave, less in the aisles where older pews may actually take place. And that might be a cost thing, versus also a trying to balance with the Victorian Society, for example, saying, oh no, we are still keeping some of our pews, so that we can therefore mitigate any potential pushback that we might get from that particular organisation through consultation. Slide. And showing some of the sort of type things. These are stackable, they're movable, and therefore give us that flexibility about using space. Turning to lighting. Although we have switchable banks in the front and the rear, and to the left or the right of the church, effectively the lights are either on or off. There's no gradation between the two. The overall lighting level at the moment, some people view as being at best just sufficient, and certainly does nothing to, or very little, to enhance the architecture of the church and bring up key points within it. The current height of the chandeliers, as I said, make it a little bit challenging to change. Bulbs, in terms of getting the ladder out, getting it over, balancing it between pews, that sort of type thing. It's not the end of the world, but the idea would be to have more modular LED, what's that stand for? Liquid? Something. Yeah, anyway, it's an LED. An LED enclosed spots or lighting system, which would therefore not only illuminate down here, but therefore illuminate as well the architecture, with significant power savings as a result of that type of system. And certainly they would be less intrusive than the chandeliers we have at the moment. They can therefore be used to enhance special services and facilitate and the wider use of the church for other users. For concerts, drama, music, instead of having Rob Davis coming in with his lights and bits and pieces, having to fiddle around all the time, we could do that ourselves relatively simply. By using a fully controllable, zoned and variable light level system throughout, we can produce an effective viewing environment for use not only for services or special events, but also in terms of looking at the wider audio visual in terms of TV screens and that sort of type thing, which I will come to in just a moment. Slide, please. So, audio visual. So we have a legacy system in here which is very much evolutionary. There is wiring all over the place. It is pretty old. There are some challenges for those who have hearing issues. So it is old and really does really need revamping. It's a pretty fragmented hybrid system as a result of its evolutionary development. And so we've got split positions of just inside the vestry here, at the back, where different control systems do different things inside the church. It is not, frankly, very much user-friendly, shall we say. The microphones, we have the lapel microphones that you see being used at services. Some have real challenges getting them to a position, particularly those single ones tied onto cassocks, for example, in people being able to hear properly what is coming out of them. We have the microphone systems left and right in the preacher and the reader's locations. There is a tendency for people to start talking around like this and actually therefore not being heard at all by the microphone, the single source of microphone. We can do things about that to make it much more a robust piece. The visuals within here, we have that. That is what we use, and it is, well, you know, I mean, yeah, I would say enough said. But it also causes then a barrier later on. So I put that here, but you've seen examples where it's been at the back of the choir stalls here, which therefore completely block out what is ever going on back there. It's clunky, it's time-consuming putting it up. It's probably a health and safety issue, but I can live with that. But you know, it is self-evidently not 21st century. And the streaming. We have a streaming system at the moment. The camera is okay. It's not quite visual acuity 11010. It's enough to show my knees are brown. That's probably about it. Maybe that's all you need. And whilst it rotates, it doesn't give a very good all-round rotation simply because it's a fixed position in here. So there are things we can do with that sort of type thing as well. So, slide already done. So the ability to use screens in here has, their use has very much increased in recent years. But it is TV monitors probably we're talking about rather than screens themselves, these sort of type screens. Because they'll provide better definition for those people having to look into them. They will produce less degradation over time, which you will find in these sort of type projectors and their bulbs. And frankly, they're simpler than having multiple projectors potentially and multiple screens around the location. So we have, why do we want these? For worship, we've got much better flexibility with projection in terms of adding liturgy to standard services. We have special services, these sort of type things. We can introduce hymns which are not normally used or available in a paper hymn book. We can remove the need for hymn books. We can remove the need for standard paper service sheets. We can remove the need for special services having additional paperwork being used and printer ink. We can ease the we can ease the following of a service for those who are not necessarily comfortable with the church or understand the church's process during the service. And it's certainly better for the environment because we will eventually use much, much, much less paper and ink in producing these things. The screens can be used throughout the church. We can get, therefore, people who are stuck behind columns and bits and pieces, they will be able to see what is going on. We have potential for a much better visitor heritage experience for people coming in to look at the building. And finally, we can then link in the audio-visual, the lighting, the wiring, all these sort of type things we can link in as a coherent whole. Slide, please. But there are a certain number of sort of chicken and egg decision-making points that need to be made. The seat type impacts the type of heating you've had, you can use, as I've implied already. So if you don't have pews or you don't have plugs in the floor that can take movable pews, under pew heating or under seating or bench heating might become problematic. So heating types will impact upon the seating impacts upon the heating types. So they are coherent decisions that have to be made. Whichever, however, we need synergy between whatever might be the early development phases and what we eventually end up with in the longer timeline. So, some miscellaneous points to go through. Firstly then, just quickly bear those in mind, secondary glazing. Slide, please. So there was concern about the DAC, the Diocesan Advisories Committee's view about secondary glazing in terms of condensation capture, the aesthetic, the visual of it. But we visited a company, they were called Storm Windows, based in South Birmingham, who produced secondary glazing. They produced it for Grade 1 listed buildings. They produced it for Grade 1 listed buildings in Gloucestershire. And David's experience, deep experience with DACs, whilst sceptical, came away from that visit going, this has actually got legs. It therefore will contribute potentially then to energy and heat retention in whatever the enclosed space is. There is a cost to it, of course, and indicative is actually much less than I thought it was going to be, particularly the bottom line in terms of refurbishment every 3 years. That's what the company proposed, in terms of therefore looking after the windows and making sure they are in good nick. And that way, therefore, we can persuade, therefore, the DAC, we believe, that the secondary glazing is a viable option. The timeline, I've put a note in here against saying optimistic exclamation mark. As things develop, there's still much more in this plan to get through. And therefore, to get it to a position to get to the DAC, which you see in the mid-time of talking about mid next year, I still think is very optimistic. It may well be a year beyond that. So this is best guess as to our progress at the moment. Slide, please. And this is also best guess, and hence the word estimated repeated once more in the slide. I've put 700K, but all whole works. I've been revising, and I'm close at the moment to 1 million. So, and it probably hasn't stopped in terms of things I haven't actually clicked and figured out. It is an expensive business. Even doing this itself, the quantity surveyor believes is something in the region of £250,000. It's an expensive business. We then have the issue that the listed places of worship grant scheme, which again you will have, I hope, picked up from me in asking you to write to our MPs and saying, government, keep this grant scheme going. It allows us to get our VAT back from any building work, execution work that we actually do. It doesn't come into the develop work, it is the execution work, and it's 20%. So if we're spending £1 million and have to provide then £200,000 additional, we're going to have to find £1.2 million, not £1 million. So that is significant. We are only able at the moment in a year to claw back £25,000. It's a big change that took place at the beginning of this financial year. So hence why, therefore, we're looking to find a pre-faculty, pre-DAC planning approval period to help with the development costs, which are roughly in the order of about £100,000. It could to get to the stage to present to the DAC. And the only people we can go to in any significant way, there are a couple of others, but they'll produce £1,000 or £5,000, not significant amounts, of the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and which is why I talk about this heritage piece quite a lot. Friends of St Peter's, potentially as a source of money, but they're not going to be able to pay for everything. And indeed, they would not wish to strip their assets just for the sake of this project. And finally, I talk about the idea of St Peter's Centre. If we do get this project going, if we get what we want as our ideal, we may well have office spaces, meeting spaces, youth spaces available to us, which may make St Peter's Centre redundant, and therefore it could be an option for us in the future to sell St Peter's Centre and therefore find some sort of cash clawback that way. It is an option potentially available to us. Consultation, we're doing that with you, we've done with the PCC, we've spoken to the diocese twice now in detail. We are the second of the ones talking to our parish and your particular interest. We will go to the town, we will go to the wider users potentially who we want to come and use this facility in the future. We need to speak to people like the Isbourne Arts Centre. They weren't even on the radar when we were talking about doing this, so we have potentially a little bit of a conflict going on as to what goes on over there, what goes on over here. It's a perception conflict. I don't think there's a conflict necessarily at all. They will do certain stuff, we will do stuff that we are better suited to do because of the environment that we are sitting in. It is how it's presented to them that will make them twitchy or no. But there are other facilities in this town, and again, so therefore, when we're going to persuade people that this is a thing to do, we need to also understand that we have competition from other facilities in this town. Tewkesbury Borough Council have been very helpful in terms of their advice so far. I've mentioned the Victorian Society, second from the bottom there, with regard to potentially, their default might be no. Well, we have to persuade them that yes, we do not stand still. English heritage we have got to consult with. There may well be others which we're seeking advice. Who are the other people we need to involve in getting their inputs into this to therefore allow us to get the necessary planning permission from our diocese? And slide, I think you've probably gone there. You have. So we want your ideas on what we are proposing so far that we can either radically rethink or tweak. We are not in a fixed stage at the moment. We value the feedback. We have to find these development grants, because if we don't, we aren't able to take this further forward. The PCC has so far spent 13,000 odd pounds on this development and are not going to spend more, essentially. We've got as far as we can within that funding line. We are not. We will continue to consult. We've got to then move on to develop the brief for planning to get the DACs, what is called the faculty, the planning authority. And as you see, we have continued to develop our own infrastructure ideas internally as to how we're going to do this. And we see where the costs keep going up, keep going up, keep going up. Thank you. I'm going to stop there at, if I can get this thing to work quickly. Oh dear, I've gone over time. I'm 40 minutes. But we were delighted to take questions, please. As a reminder, we have microphones. Because this is streamed, we need you to speak into the microphone so those who are listening, I hope there are some, will be able to pick up. But are there any questions? Jane. Wait, please, if you would.
The costing of the 50,000 for the pre-development, could you break that down a bit for us? It does
yes.
seem very high.
Yes, I can, if you give me a moment. I need to go and find something on my machine. So let me take perhaps another question. It's not 50, it's much more than that. Other questions, please? Is that my only one? In which case, pause, I will find the answer for you. Peter, IP, grant applications, National Lottery Heritage Fund, version 7. Okay, here we go. Ready? Approximately. Architect, a further £45,000. The survey drawing, he may need to come back and do some further work on the work he's done already, another couple of K. Quantity surveyor work, some 6K on pre-contract tenders that they would therefore look at. They've already done a rough quantity surveying work for both options as part of the needed those sort of figures to come to. Archaeologist, a rather optimistic 4K with regard to work, particularly underground work, and anything dealing with taking up floors and bits and pieces will automatically require an archaeologist to come in. Structural engineer, some 8K, depending on the technical design required, and the structural input therefore required from that. Mechanical, electrical and heating design, some 7K. Seating design, nil. Battery design, some 3 to 4K. Lighting design, 2K, and AV design, 2K, though latter two are estimates at the moment because we haven't yet had the feedback for that. That comes to some 79K. Then add the VAT and it comes to your run about 100K. Yep. It's horrible.
For the structural engineers who are, doing plans for the heating, sometimes they do estimates free, don't they, when
Yes.
they first come and do surveys?
Yes.
Are they doing that? Or
They will
not?
do, yes. They will start doing that.
They will
Eventually,
do
what I hadn't included in there is then the contingency fund, which is basically 10% of the whole lot.
Right.
Yes, they eventually will, but eventually they'll say, well, okay, we've stopped. So we have to identify funds in there that if they get to such a stage of saying, we've done everything for free so far, but now it's got to the stage where actually we need to start charging.
Because,
we're identifying
that's
the
what
funds.
they do when they're bidding, isn't it? They do it free and then
Yes,
provide a
but-
bid.
but-
So
but-
I don't understand why they're charging so much.
Well, the starters, they
before they've
haven't
done the
charged
bid.
anything. It's part of the contingency of we have to identify this. If I go back to the National Lottery later and say, oh, we've not included such and such, they're going to go, well, sorry, we're not really interested anymore. Yeah, please do.
So just to expand on Simon's point and to answer Joe's question, it was a very good question. Those development costs are so important because to get it to and through the DAC will want to see very, very, very fine detail of the plans. So, for example, if we wanted to do an AV system which went throughout the whole of the building, they will want to know exactly where every wire was going to go and how it was going to be trunked and fixed and how every speaker was going to fix. They want to know all of the sound technical data. They will need to know the lighting on whatever system we might use for projection. So it's very, very fine detail. And if we don't have that fine detail, we won't get it through the DAC. So we have, sadly, to pay that. But it's right that we pay that in a sense because it's not like asking someone to do a little bit of work in your house. We're asking someone to do a big project, so we do need to know that we are in control of every aspect of that and they're not damaging the building in any way. And that's the main concern. Yes,
we then committed to that company before they've bid.
So, for example, the AV, which I'm heading up with Sue, we've had 3 companies all come in to give us a quote. Part of that quote includes that sort of fine detail work, but from that quote we can see several things. From our meeting with them, we can see whether they are technically able to do it. And they're asking the right questions of us, and they're looking at the right solutions that we're saying, we need this done, how would you suggest doing it? They come back to us with a cost. And whilst that cost is fixed at the moment, and they have given us enough detail in it to say, well, we'd be providing this type of speaker, we'll be doing this length of cabling, we'll be doing this with the microphones, we'll be doing this with the AV rack. We can see all of that detail, but we haven't got the really fine detail about how that's going to be installed. They will work that up, ready for the DAC. Their task will be to get it through the DAC. So we'll know which is the best value, and I would suggest it's not always the cheapest. As we'll probably know in our own houses, that, if you want it done on the cheap, we can do it on the cheap, but it'll look a mess and won't work properly. We want something that is going to be right for this building. So we will look at all of that. We'll then take it to the architect to say, here's what we would like to do. Is this okay in terms of, is it possible? Is it okay for the building, so we're not going to do any damage to the building? And the architect will say, yes, but you need to change that or whatever. Then it will go back to the company. They'll work up a huge plan, which will then go to the DAC, and the DAC will go through it with a fine-tooth comb. Believe me, I'm on the DAC here, and I was on the DAC in Manchester. It's harder to get things through this DAC. Than it was in Manchester. They want more detail. So we do need to pay for it, I'm afraid. But it would be worth it.
So we're paying at that stage and then we're committed to that company.
Yeah, absolutely. But they'll be wanting to work with us. We've already decided that they're the best value to work with. We have a quote from them. So it's not a case of saying we want to work with company B and then just handing them a blank check, if that's what you're worried about. It's saying, these are the costs. The bidding process happens at this stage before we make the decision on who we're going to go with. So yes, there is a bidding phase, and all of that will be written up and presented to the IP project and to the PCC. So all that bidding phase, phase is happening. Our problem at the moment is it's bidding today, and if we were able to do it in the next few months, they'll be saying, that's fine, we'll go with that price. We wait 3 years, that price will go up. But we can't, but the nature of things is we can't wait too long. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Just pass the microphone to it's behind you.
Just, I think very quickly. Obviously, this is very ambitious and very exciting. What examples have we got in Gloucestershire and maybe even wider where they've done a similar project in a similar building? And I know it's all very similar. And how are we working with them to take advice and all that kind of stuff? Because obviously, we're not just going, oh, this is a great idea and this is how we're going to do it.
So, I'm not going to be able to list them all off the top of my head, but we've been down to, what's the name of the one on your way to Cirencester, off the side of the road there, with the Energy Advisors place. There's Pip and Jim's have gone to go and visit too. There is Lechlade St Lawrence's, which is doing actually a similar type project, but started in 2021, their sort of type process, so at least 3 years ahead of us in what we're doing. We went to Wales, where there was a place in Wales, I can't even remember where it was. Oh, Chedworth, that's the one we went to go and have a look at, particularly IR heating. We went down, did you go to Wales, Helen? I can't remember. Yeah, to go and look at the IR heating, which had orange lighting to it. Rather unfortunately for them, when they turned it on, it blew. So not a particularly high selling point. So we have been to a significant number of places. Continue to speak to the project manager at Lechlade St Lawrence, because their project is so similar to ours in terms of literature, material, advertising, where they've been with that sort of type of thing, what sort of thing they're doing. So we are consulting from that perspective in saying, there are others out there who have experience that we should draw from. Thank you. Where's your speaker? Just behind you to Jenny.
Lisa, that was the same question I was going to ask, but I did just want to thank all of you who've worked so hard on producing this so far. I mean, I think we all appreciate what a huge amount of work it is, and I really appreciate now knowing a lot more about it, and look forward to the next briefing you give us.
Thank you, Jenny. Any more questions, please? Counting down, 3, 2. Thank you very much. And thank you for your attention. Good. Thank you, David, again.